first thing I would say is that I don't think compression is for everybody. If you're a sort of a Stevie Ray style player, sort of heavy-handed, and you really dig into the notes, I don't think compression necessarily works for that style, because you kind of miss the transient, you miss the attack, the immediacy of that sound is what makes it so interesting. I certainly used to be that style player. I even had the hat at one point. I'm pretty sure the initials on the scratch plate was on the cards as well. In fact, I may have done that at some point. Had about 5 different strats. Anyway, I didn't use a compressor then because it didn't really go with that style. I've changed my style to be more of a sort of a buttery, fluid slide thing. And, certainly inspired by guys like Sonny Landreth. Bonnie Raitt is actually a really underrated slide player, and she uses a compressor as well. Lowell George is famous for using 2 compressors chained together, which is what the slide rig is all about. It's a sort of an emulation of the way he was getting his sound. I actually went cold turkey on compression for about 6 months before the lockdown, because I didn't want it to be something that I was using as a crutch. I wanted it to be, a conscious decision because I like the sound of it, rather than something that I had to have, a total necessity. Anyway, let's talk about how I'm using it, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples here as well. So the first thing is the way in which you set your volume on the guitar. Compression, if you use it in a program, like a mixing software, maybe side-chained or on a mastering bus, if you wanted to get more energy into a mix, you could compress more by really hitting the front of the compressor harder. So you've got to figure that with compression, you have a threshold, which is kind of your line in the sand, and anything beyond that level is going to get attenuated by the compression. Well, if you have a smaller wave of sound and it's below the level of the threshold, it's not going to get attenuated by the compression. The compression never kicks in. Whereas if you have a consistently loud signal, it's consistently going above the threshold, and that will be attenuated. This is sort of simplifying compression a little bit here, but that's basically what's happening. Well, you can do that with a guitar pedal as well. If you turn your volume down to around about 4 or 5, you're never sending a particularly loud signal through the compressor, and it won't sound as compressed. Obviously, the problem then becomes that you've backed your volume down, and you may not have enough volume to get over the top of the band. So I only use amps that are loud enough and have enough clean headroom to get over the top of the band with an incredibly clean sound. I've got to set my amp so that my volume on 4 or 5 with the compressor running is loud enough to solo on over the top of the band. The way I set the volume for the compressor is the same as the way I would set for an overdrive pedal into a clean amp. Now, into a dirty amp, I would boost significantly, because then you hit the front end of the amp and you get sort of more overdrive and that kind of stuff, and you'd also generate natural compression doing that. With a clean amp, I don't feel that it works in quite the same way. So I tend to set my overdrive and compressors at unity gain, which means that basically it's the same volume if it's on or off. And I set that volume with the guitar volume wide open. So I set the guitar volume on 10, and then I set the pedal to be unity gain with the guitar volume on 10. Now, if you turn the pedal off, and just try this with your drives, turn your guitar volume down to about 3, and obviously there's hardly any volume coming out of your amp at that point. You're just going into a clean channel with your guitar on 3. There's very little signal. Now, even if you set it to be unity gain with your volume on 10, if you step on the pedal with your guitar volume on 3, it will boost quite significantly. Which means that you'll still be able to solo over the top of the band on a completely clean sound without it sounding really compressed, but you'll still get some of the sustain from the compressor pedal, and you'll still get the kind of the smooth, buttery distortion that I think you get when you use a compressor before the drives. And it'll also feel squishy under the fingers, and I like things to feel squishy under the fingers. As a third thing, because this will look good as a YouTube title, 3 things, I don't stack compression with 2 other sources of drive. So if you had drive on the amp and a drive pedal, that would be enough drive. Like, that's enough distortion for anyone, and also enough compression for anyone, because if you hit the front end of the amp very hard with the pedal, it will naturally compress and the sound will sag. I wouldn't put compression with 2 other drive pedals because, again, same problem. It's just going to turn to sludge. There's going to be no definition there. So I'd use compression with a clean amp, I'd use compression with a dirty amp, but only the compressor with the dirty amp, and I'd use compression with 1 other drive pedal. And it sort of acts like a stage of gain. I guess, you can, if you wanted to, it's not the way I do it, but you could hit the drive pedal harder with the compressor, thus making the drive compress more and distort more. But yeah, I would only use it with 1 other form of overdrive, because otherwise, for me, it just turns to sludgy mess. Okay, I hope some of that was useful to you. I hope you dug the video. If it did, give me a like, share, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Later.